Okay, so we're going to go through how to answer or approach this 15 marker. The ethical theories of Bentham and Kant are not consistent with religious moral decision making. So before we even start, we need to really unpack the question. So there's two ethical theories mentioned, the theories of Bentham and Kant, but it's asking you to think about how consistent they are with religious moral decision making. And for us, that means Christian moral decision making. So think first of all what it would mean for the theories of Bentham and Kant to be consistent with Christian religious moral decision making, and that really hinges on how we understand the word consistent. What does consistent mean? In agreement? Does it mean compatible? You need to be really clear on that before you start, because the best answers to this question will really engage with the idea of consistency, and we'll use that word throughout the answer. Thirdly, I think it's worth noting whether there is any consistency in Christian moral decision making in and of itself. And as I'm sure you remember, there isn't really. Okay, so we have different approaches to religious moral decision making in Christianity, and of course that's going to impact on how consistent both Bentham and Kant's theories can be. So, as always with a 15 marker, we need to start by identifying the thesis. So it needs to be really clear from the start of your answer what you will be arguing and why. It's really important that you establish a clear thesis at the start, because it helps you meet that criteria for a very well-focused answer. If you have a thesis at the start and then you keep linking back to it throughout. So here is an example of how you could set out a thesis and how you can ensure that it is kind of supported by reasoning, and there's like an argument that's being given essentially. So it says, Christian moral decision making is not always consistent, as Christianity is such a diverse religion, including so many different denominations, ethical theories, and ways to interpret scripture. For this reason, while there are some points of consistency, I agree with the statement that the ethical theories of Bentham and Kant are not consistent with Christian moral decision making overall. This is because it is not possible for their theories to be consistent with an approach to moral decision making that is not itself consistent. So note there that I've really unpacked the question a little bit. I've thought about what religious moral decision making is in Christianity. I've mentioned why there is no one way to make moral decisions in Christianity. I've given a really clear way that I would be answering the question, really clear reason for my thesis, and sort of explained it as well. So note the phrases "for this reason" and "this is because" that are in bold. They're really helpful phrases to include at the start of your essay when you are setting out your thesis. So with this question, it is quite a complex one, because essentially you're being asked to compare and evaluate the consistency between two very different ethical approaches and Christianity. And so there's really two ways that you can approach this question. Firstly, you can choose to refer to both Bentham and Kant in each section of your essay. So you can see some example paragraphs here below. I'll just give you a few moments just to read that. You could pause the video. So having read that, hopefully you can see how I've woven together both theories. So I've talked about Bentham and Kant and whether they are not consistent, and then in my counter argument section, my however section, I've done the same thing. So in both those little starters of your paragraphs there, I've mentioned both Bentham and Kant, okay? And so that's one approach that you could use. The second approach is that you could essentially divide it up, and you could refer to Bentham and Kant in separate sections of your essay. So again, here I've tried to show you kind of what that would look like by giving you some starters for the paragraphs. So you've firstly got just a little section there just about Bentham, and then we've got a however point just about Bentham, and then you would follow that with an argument just from Kant, and then your however point from Kantian ethics as well. So there are two different ways that you can choose to answer the question, and it's really up to you which one you think would be best for you so you don't get confused. So in terms of structure, remember what we're looking for in your main body paragraphs is this. You need to set out an argument in support of your thesis. Then you need to give a however point to counter your thesis. And then crucially, you need to say why you reject the counter argument and then reaffirm your thesis in a sort of mini conclusion. And I've colour-coded this for you in red. so you can see how that looks. So the however, use of the word however is really helpful. It shows that discussion between the views. So imagine that I've already set out my argument in support of the thesis, then I'm giving my however point, and then crucially in red, I say why I'm rejecting the counter argument, and then I say again why I reaffirm my thesis. So again, pause the video, read that, and hopefully that will help. So what we're looking for in a 15 marker in timed conditions is that you basically kind of repeat this structure, ideally 2 to 3 times. That will really help you show a depth to your analysis and a depth to your reasoning. Obviously, at the end, it's really important that you leave time for a conclusion as well. So your conclusion should clearly summarise the reasoning you've shown in your essay. You need to make it clear why you still support your thesis despite the counter arguments you've analysed in your answer. And so you can see there underneath, kind of again, like a first part of conclusion that you could give. The use of the word overall at the start of the conclusion is really helpful. And again, that use of the phrase, this is because, which I also had in the thesis statement, is really helpful because it flags that you are trying to interpret and analyse and use reasoning. So I hope that helps. Give it a try.